Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Breaking news: the desperate search for survivors following catastrophic flash floods in central Texas. The death toll soaring as dozens are still missing, and now the tropical threat as millions head home from the long holiday weekend. First, grief and uncertainty as search and rescue operations enter a third day. More than 75 people killed across Texas, including girls from a Christian summer camp. Many are still missing. The hardest hit area, known as Flash Flood Alley. Officials now facing mounting questions about why the summer camps were not evacuated despite warnings about severe weather. And tonight, the new details about the victims, the young campers, and the heroes. We're in the air with the U.S. Coast Guard searching for survivors. Pope Leo among the millions around the world offering prayers and condolences. Matt Gutman and Maria Villarreal in the disaster zone. Torrential rain could also hinder the journey home for millions of Americans after the July 4th weekend. Tropical storm Chantal coming ashore in the Carolinas overnight on what's expected to be the busiest day for air travel and driving. Our weather team tracking it all. President Trump issuing a new tariff warning. The White House saying he'll start sending about a dozen letters tomorrow to countries explaining the new tariff rate each could face if they don't make a deal. Billionaire Elon Musk says he's starting a new political party after slamming President Trump's massive tax cut and spending bill. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu heading to the White House for a meeting with President Trump. This comes amid deadly airstrikes and a new push for a ceasefire with Hamas. A Domino's pizza shop erupts into flames in Utah after a three-car wreck ruptures a nearby gas line. Multiple shark sightings again forcing a holiday weekend beach closure. Ozzy Osbourne taking the stage for a final bow. Details of the rock legend's retirement concert. And America Strong tonight, the 12-year-old on a mission, soothing rescue animals with music.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday.
Welcome back. So Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for New York City mayor, and his new poster boy has a history of anti-Semitism, including this highly offensive video making fun of Hanukkah that he posted back in 2024. Yeah. Fox News reached out to Mamdani's campaign about the video, but has not heard back. And Mamdani's still catching heat for reportedly lying about his race on his college application. But that doesn't seem to bother the far left. They'll keep defending Mamdani, including House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who dodged the question last night.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams is attacking Mamdani over reports that he identified himself as African American and Asian on college application. I mean, is this a real issue to you?
I think to me, the issue that we have to deal with in New York City, which our Democratic nominee did talk about extensively during the primary campaign, is affordability.
Kaylee, I seem to think that Mamdani's appeal is much like Gavin Newsom's. It's almost aside from policy, it has to do with his persona, how he carries himself, how he looks. He has some charisma. We talked about this last night, actually. And then some of those policies that he's putting out there are very appealing to a younger audience. We were talking about that earlier. What are your thoughts on it?
I think the charisma is a big part of it, especially for young voters my age. I think his social media appeal was a big part of it. I do think that the talk of affordability was also a big deal for younger voters in New York who might be struggling. Of course, I think they lack the political and life experience to understand that the solutions that he's putting forward are nothing but empty promises. But what's notable is that you know who did see through that? Actual working class New Yorkers. If you look at the demographic breakdown of the primary election, it showed that Black New Yorkers, Hispanic New Yorkers making under $50,000, they did not vote for Mamdani. They voted for Andrew Cuomo because they see through socialism as, the failure that it would be for this city.
Arthel, I understand there's been a push on the right. Curtis, I always say his name, Sliwa. He came out on Fox and said, listen, don't talk about this race on the college application thing, talk about his policies. But when you go and make a video like that, which is essentially making fun of both a race and a religion, you kind of put yourself out there and you need to kind of walk a straight line. And I don't know that lying about your race is walking a straight line for a record.
No, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think one of Mamdani's appeals is that, as you said, Kaylee, because he does he knows how to use social media. He has some sort of charisma that these young people are being galvanized by. But because you do understand how social media never goes away, you don't make a video like that. It's going to come back to haunt you, and it's inappropriate, quite frankly. But, listen, I think that I noticed that Minority Leader Jeffries didn't necessarily answer Mr. Sharpton's question, and I think that's where the Democrats are having some big problems.
Hello there. On this Monday morning, the Prime Minister faces a fresh revolt over special needs support.
Senior figures warn that the plans risk becoming welfare Mark II.
However, as the government insists the changes aren't about saving money, but will Keir Starmer be able to keep control of his MPs?
Today marks the 20th anniversary of the 7/7 bombings. We'll be looking back at the day that shocked the country and marked a turn in the threat posed to the UK. We'll be joined by a survivor later in the programme.
Tariffs are going to be the tariffs. I think we'll have most countries done by July 9th.
President Trump said his team will start reaching out to trade partners today with new tariff threats as the 90-day trade pause ends.
Calls for action on new refined.
And it's thrilled to take the streets of a Spanish bull running festival. We're asking, is it time to ditch this tradition?
Good morning. Cam Norrie is carrying GB hopes into the second week at Wimbledon after he came through a 5-set thriller to make the quarterfinals. It was the end of the road, though, for Sonny Cartel. And
I look at the weather for the forthcoming days, with temperatures set to be head for a week.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme. I'm Eamon Holmes.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Well,
you had a very busy day yesterday, didn't you?
I hadn't sleep like with Nana's engagement party last night.
On this Sunday night, hope fades in flood-ravaged Texas. The rising death toll as the rescue mission slowly turns to recovery.
I'm looking for survivors. I'm looking for unfortunate non-survivors so they can have a final resting place.
Plus, the desperate search for a group of missing girls swept downstream.
It was nothing short of horrific to see what those young children went through.
The price and the push for lasting peace.
Make our government end this helpless and hopeless war.
The continued barrage as high-stakes truce talks take place in Qatar. Travel advice delay.
I understand the political sensitivities, but, our first responsibility is to our citizens.
Why was Canada so late in issuing travel advisories amid increased scrutiny at the U.S. border? And swiping left.
I've heard people get really lucky. I personally did not have that experience.
As the spark fizzled for dating apps.
Reporting tonight, Tracy Tom.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We begin once again in Texas, where officials are promising to keep searching for the missing after catastrophic flash floods on Friday. The confirmed death toll has jumped to at least 78, including more than 10. And young girls from a Christian summer camp are still unaccounted for. Rescuers and volunteers are searching through broken trees, overturned cars, and mud-filled debris. U.S. President Donald Trump declared the deadly flooding a major disaster today to support state and local recovery efforts. And people in certain areas are being urged to move to higher ground.
There's rain still falling on the area. It's not going to take the same amount of rain that caused this damage to make the current water levels rise up, right? Because the ground is already saturated, so any rain that falls can be perceived as life-threatening rain.
Candace Cole reports on where search efforts are at and what we know about the victims. 48 hours after Friday's deadly flash floods that ravaged Kirk County, Texas, and the surrounding area, the search continues for survivors.
I've never seen tragedy on this level, the destruction that this flood has caused.
Top of mind, the little girls who were attending a Christian camp near the Guadalupe River, presumably swept away as the waters rose to 9 meters. These pictures showing the devastation left behind at Camp Mystic, bunk beds and belongings covered in mud.
We extend our sincerest condolences and prayers for every single family affected by this tragedy.
Sadly, of the more
surprising that the death of an Aboriginal person in custody is felt throughout the territory and the nation.
Victoria announces a new task force in the wake of more anti-Semitic attacks in Melbourne. Police investigating a criminal gang allegedly involved in the murder, kidnapping and torture of victims in multiple states. Around 80 killed in flash flooding in Texas. Authorities are continuing the desperate search for survivors with more heavy rain on the way. And experts concerned by a spike in cancer diagnoses in younger Australians. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Miriam Korowa. The Northern Territory coroner has handed down her long-awaited findings into the 2019 death of Kunjai Walker. And a warning, this story contains the image of an Aboriginal person who's died, used with the permission of their family. The 19-year-old was fatally shot by a police officer in the remote community of Yuendamu, 300 kilometres northwest of Alice Springs. Mr. Walker was shot by then Police Constable Zachary Rolfe during an attempted arrest. Mr. Rolfe was later charged with murdering the 19-year-old, but was acquitted of all charges in the NT Supreme Court. Mr. Rolfe's lawyers argued the 3 shots were fired in self-defence, as Mr. Walker had stabbed the officer in the shoulder with a pair of scissors during a scuffle. His death was subject to a mandatory coronial inquest under Territory law. NT Coroner Elizabeth Armitage has been investigating the circumstances of the shooting since 2022, hearing more than 70 witnesses over 66 sitting days. At a special hearing in Yuendamu, Judge Armitage has handed down her findings, saying her recommendations aim to prevent a similar tragedy from occurring again. Reporter Melissa McKay was at the hearing.
This was a massive report that was just handed down by the Northern Territory coroner, several hundred pages, and what we've seen so far is just a snapshot of those findings. The coroner spoke just now for about an hour, giving a brief overview of her findings and recommendations. Some of those findings...
Leaders and innovators shape what's next. The biggest names are on France 24. Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Hello and a warm welcome. If you're just joining us, you're watching Daybreak here on France 24. These are the headlines. A first round of talks between Hamas and Israeli delegates yields nothing. This as the Israeli Prime Minister meets with Donald Trump in the White House. Some hope there that a push towards a ceasefire can be met, but for now, Israeli bombings keep Palestinians Kinga on Sunday. The death toll from flooding in Texas rises to 82, with almost 40 other people still missing, and more rain forecast, meaning conditions remain dangerous. 2 days to find a deal or face U.S. trade tariffs as of August 1st. Few countries have found an agreement with Washington and are racing for France Festival is gathering of 40 Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hoped to play some role in pushing towards a ceasefire deal for Gaza, possibly to the release of more hostages, and it could have a personal guarantee by Trump. 21 months into the war on Gaza, and with at least 57,000 Palestinians killed, the crisis waited and continue intensifying, in fact, over the past few days ahead of the talks. Charlotte Lamb brings us the latest.
Gaza Sunday, as Israel sends a delegation to Qatar for talks on a possible hostage and ceasefire deal. Palestinians have been killed after an Israeli strike hit a residential building overnight in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood. To end the war, the Israeli delegation is meeting Hamas officials in Doha as part of ongoing includes these days fire. The Israeli living hostages, the handover of hostage bodies, and the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. This, as Israel's Prime Minister is scheduled to sit down with US President Donald Trump in Washington Monday.
This is an opportunity to develop peace far beyond what we'd have imagined before. We've already transformed the Middle East beyond recognition and have the opportunity and ability to change it even more and bring a future to the state of Israel, the people of Israel, and the entire Middle East.
Trump, before boarding Air Force One in New Jersey, told reporters he was confident of some deals coming to light.
I think there's a good chance we have a deal with Hamas during the week, pertaining to quite a few of the hostages. You know, we've gotten a lot of the hostages out, but pertaining to the remaining hostages, quite a few we got. I think we'll have that done this week.
As Palestinians more Good morning, it's 6 o'clock. On today's show, we're talking about the trial that's gripped Australia. Erin Patterson is guilty of murdering her ins using poisonous mushrooms. And will the government's next measures be over special educational needs? It's Monday, the 7th of July. Well, the jury finds Erin Patterson guilty on all counts in the mushroom murder trial. 20 years since 52 people were killed in the worst terror attack on British soil. An Israeli reservist who has served in Gaza speaks out to Sky News, claiming IDF soldiers randomly shot dead civilians in Gaza. The death toll in the Texas flood system rises to 82, with many missing. Where will the money come from, with Labour's backbenchers demanding more spending U-turns? Is a wealth tax the answer? And winner Silverstone, Britain's Lando Norris wins the British Grand Prix. Very good morning. First to some breaking news. In the last hour, the jury in the Australian mushroom murder trial has found Erin Patterson guilty of murdering her 3 relatives and attempting to murder another 50-year-old. Served beef Wellington pastries laced with death cap mushrooms. Let's be live to you, Sky's Nicole Johnson, now live for us from Sydney. So guilty then on all counts.
That's right. It has been a case that's gripped Australia. It's had international attention as well. It is a foreign country in Victoria at the core of it. Essentially, Erin Patterson was accused and now found guilty of killing her estranged husband's family. So this is her in-laws, Gail and Don Wilkinson, Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, and the attempted murder of Heather's husband, Ian Wilkinson. Now, Ian also ate the meal. He was gravely ill, but the meal, as you said, was a beef Wellington, as something that's had a lot of attention here in Australia. It was considered an unusual dish to try and prepare for people. The real question was, though, did deliberately place these dead cat mushrooms in the meal, or was it a tragic accident? Well, the court has found that it was deliberately placed. There were all sorts of lies and contradictions that came up during the process. Went on for about 9 weeks, but now we finally have a verdict.
Give us a sense, Nicole, as each of the verdicts came through one by one. What was the reaction of Erin Patterson?
According to the reports, she was in the court, of course. She sat there quite stoically. There wasn't a great deal of emotion at all. It is early days at this, so know that was coming in. During most of the court case, she was considered quite a strong witness in her own defence. Essentially, it was quite unusual for her defence to put her onto the stand, but she spoke eloquently and often had sort of very deep, but said there were serious contradictions as well, and the Australian public has been gripped by all the ins and outs of this. Erin Patterson had told her family that she had cancer. It turns out she didn't. She said that she didn't own a dehydrator, but evidence later emerged that she had. And there were other unusual parts of the case, such as the fact that she had decided to make individual beef Wellington pies instead of one large log. And the prosecution said that that was so that she could control the meal and make sure that she didn't serve any of
documentary.
This is your news, and these are our top stories. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is preparing for talks with Donald Trump in Washington about a ceasefire in Gaza. The President is intent on end the fighting and says a deal could come this week. Israel and Hamas resumed direct negotiations, but the talks ended with no progress made. Israel's army is sending notices 15 ultra-Orthodox Jewish men. A Supreme Court ruling last year overturned a decades-long exemption for religious students. It's a divisive issue which could now put Netanyahu and coalition at risk. Rescue teams are still searching for girls missing in floods which engulfed a summer camp in Texas. Dozens of people were swept to their deaths by the fast-moving waters. Children and adults officials won't give up until everyone is found.
Ivorian diaspora is mobilizing Paris, calling for democratic and inclusive elections. This rally was organized by the youth of the Democratic Party of Côte d'Ivoire, the main opposition party. Abroad who participate in the expression of democracy in the countries where we live. The debtors are protesting the exclusion of their presidential candidate, Tidjane Thiam, from the electoral list for the October vote. Precisely, our concern is that the president refuses to include our leader on the electoral list. This election to be inclusive, and all political party presidents must be able to stand, so that at the end of the day, the winner truly represents the president of our country. Beyond supporting their candidate, the party is speaking out against a climate of repression and fear in the West African country in the run-up to the election. We no longer have to demonstrate. The president of the student JPDCI was arrested 2 days ago. The president of the rural JPDCI was also arrested, so we no longer have the right to speak out in Côte d'Ivoire. Young people just want democracy and peaceful elections. Côte d'Ivoire has never had peaceful elections. Today in Côte d'Ivoire, when we talk about October, everyone you only have to hear October 2025. We were born, and until now, we've never known peaceful elections. We want it to start now. For these members of the Ivorian diaspora, there can be no lasting peace without electoral justice. They're calling for a free, peaceful, and inclusive election to write a new democratic page. Because certain countries, due to their power, unilaterally assume power at every moment in history and set the rules for themselves. Sonko took aim at US tariff hikes, saying that some historically powerful countries are trying to change those rules now that the world is shifting to a more balanced order. He also praised initiatives from the global south, particularly within the BRICS group of emerging economies, calling them vital steps, creating a more equitable and multilateral world. In this dance in Rio de Janeiro, a therapist is giving her patients with Parkinson's disease capoeira lessons. Capoeira is a traditional Brazilian mixture of everyone has been diagnosed with Parkinson's, a neurodegenerative disease that causes tremors, stiffness, and problems with balance. 8-year-old Nilma Freitas used to have frequent falls. Since I've been training capoeira, I feel like a different person. I feel safe walking and looking at others, giving movement to my body, making my life a child. Classes are the brainchild of Rosie Pejoto, who decided to try capoeira on some of her patients. She says the range of movements involved in the sport is why it's so helpful to patients. Capoeira is multifactorial. The movement of capoeira is wide, and the swapping upper and lower limbs, arms and legs in a synchronized and coordinated way. Neurologist Dr. Eduardo Nascimento oversees many of Pejoto's people with drug treatment to control their Parkinson's symptoms, but he says capoeira's rhythm is a great help. Many times it promotes an improvement. For example, using the drums. The sequence of the rhythm makes the perfect motion, which probably activates different motor pathways in the brain, other than the one which has been compromised.
Vias motoras, tem outras estradas de movimento no cérebro que não aquela que foi comprometida, aquela que está automatizada.
If this Brazilian success story goes global, many more people may feel the healing power of capoeira.
Tonight, the desperate search for survivors in Texas. Riskier tonight. Hundreds of first responders combing hill country to try to find anyone left alive. Nearly 80 people killed so far in those devastating flash floods. Dozens still missing, including girls from a sleepaway camp. Our correspondent getting a view from above with the Coast Guard. And on the ground, catastrophic destruction. Flood survivors now sharing more about their terrifying escapes.
I've seen it flood, but I've never seen it come up this high.
What they saw while the water rose faster than they could have imagined. More than reached to avoid tariffs. President saying late today about Elon Musk's third-party announcement. President Trump set to meet with Israel's Prime Minister tomorrow as the push for a Gaza ceasefire ramps up. A strip mall exploding overnight. How a massive car crash started it all. Look at that. Alive. Your footage tonight, as you can see a truck bed full of their way.
Tonight, the desperate search underway at Central. We need help. As the floodwaters recede, the desperate for many of them children from a camp.
Red Camp Mystic looking for our kids.
Plus, taking new images of the devastation.
I'm Jason Allen in hard-hit Kerr County, where people have been pulling things out of homes, and in some places, there are no homes left.
Talks. The Trump administration doubling down on getting our biggest traders to negotiate consequences.
Countries are racing to set deals up with us ahead of the deadline.
Travel troubles, the roadblocks, and the post-holiday rush home. Annalise Preston at LAX, where passengers are trying to get home as the busy holiday weekend comes to a close. And your back-to-work forecast. Overseas, new peace talks. I'm Elizabeth Palmer in Tel Aviv. The Israelis and Hamas are heading back into negotiations on a ceasefire for Gaza. And later, roaming the prairie. The grassroots effort to bring back the bison.
This is the best part of my job.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, a preview of a high-stakes meeting in Washington as President Trump is to talk with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about the future of the Middle East. Then tick season is upon us, and tick-borne diseases are on the rise. We get insight from a doctor on how to enjoy the outdoors safely.
At this moment, the ticks are very active. When we look back over the last couple of decades, we are seeing more and more tick bites happening and more tick-borne infections. So the problem is unfortunately increasing each year.
And the dangers of rising temperatures and melting glaciers.